Welcome to Closer to Venus. I'm Johnny Burke, and today's guest is Susanne Morais. She is a certified transpersonal and spiritual hypnotist, and her work often utilizes the law of attraction and spirit guide connection to move her clients towards living in alignment with their purpose. Today, we'll discuss what she's learned from her practice, as well as how it's possible to talk directly to our loved ones who have passed. Susanne, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, Johnny. I'm really excited to be here.
Excellent. So tell us, what is the difference between a hypnotist and a transpersonal hypnotist?
Yeah, that's a good question. Transpersonal really involves body, mind, and spirit. A transpersonal hypnotist leads a session in a way that is client-centered. So the client's subconscious essentially is leading the session, as opposed to what you might see in more traditional hypnotherapy, where a hypnotist is dropping suggestions and perhaps speaking the whole time, client's not really reacting. This is an engaged process where we go back and forth, and I'm following along based on the subconscious. So essentially, the client is leading the session.
Okay, interesting. It's not really a term that we hear all that often. Now, on the spiritual side, does that have more to do with things like past life regression or past life readings, or is it something different?
Yeah, it's that and more. So I do facilitate past life regression sessions. I do work with people for womb regression. I do work with people who want to meet their spirit guides or perhaps connect with an ancestor that's passed. There's lots of different ways that spirit can be brought into a session. My training allowed me to focus on that. And I believe that it enriches a hypnosis session so much more to be able to bring in that spiritual element.
Speaking of the spiritual element, how did you find yourself on that path and bringing that into your work? It's not something every hypnotist does, at least not yet. Maybe they will in the future.
You know, I actually think that they do. They just don't realize they're doing it. You know, I really believe that the subconscious is the higher self. But yeah, how did I get here? You know, interestingly, I was a university assistant teaching professor for 24 years. I was at Clemson University, Penn State University, North Carolina State University. A few years ago, I was on a road trip with my daughter, and my daughter asked me if I believed in past lives. And I thought, well, yeah, I do, but I really don't know very much about it. Let's listen to a podcast. And we listened to Simon Brown's The Past Life podcast, and she was satisfied after one, but I started binging thereafter.
It's a good one.
It's so good. Yeah, he does a good job with that. I really found myself fascinated and wanting to know more, and I started reading. And then I decided one year, I'm going to treat myself to a past life regression. And that was really the start of it. It was even before I had this session when I was meeting with the hypnotist. I heard myself say, this was not a thought I consciously had. I want to do what you do. And this didn't really align with my whole professor life. So it was a little surprising to hear it come out of my mouth, but I was certainly being guided to that work simply because as soon as I said it, the universe opened up and said, yes, that is what you're supposed to do. I was led to an amazing training. I was specifically looking for training in past life regression, which is how the spiritual element came in. As soon as I finished my certification, I was working part-time. It was very clear within just a few months that I was much happier doing this type of work, that I felt like it was really important work. It was making a difference. And I went full time with it. So yeah, that's how I got here.
So the first past life regression session you did, I'm not sure whether that was the only one, but can you tell us what you saw or what you experienced?
For me personally, like when I was doing it or one that I have facilitated?
This was what you actually saw.
Yeah, I found this one pretty fascinating. I was a young female, I want to say probably late 1800s, barefoot in an old town and feeling a little bit shameful about my bare feet, which seemed to be a theme throughout the whole session. But it seemed to be indicative of my financial status, my family's financial status. But I was deeply in love, and I was deeply in love with somebody I had grown up with. And that's really how the whole session focused. And over again, I picked up on the sensation of tremendous, overpowering love for this person. I could smell the person in the past life regression. I could see the golden hairs on his arm. I could still see it. He had a very unusual name, and that I don't remember anymore. We were very much in love, and it kind of took us through to where we were married, to where we had children, and to the unfortunate day when he died. And all I know is that he died on the road. I was pretty young with 3 kids. When he died, it was so devastating because I loved him so much that I never spoke again. And I became a terrible mother. And my kids resented me. And I made a promise to myself that love hurts and that I was going to close myself off to love. Those were some of the issues I struggled with a little bit in this life. And so that understanding was interesting. I also have thyroid issues, which is generally related to the throat chakra. So therefore that promise seems to have manifested in an illness I carried over into this life. And interesting to note that since that session, I have not had any kind of thyroid issues. That's the short story of it.
Since that experience, that has to do with the healing properties.
The healing properties, absolutely. I will say that in this life, I had medical care. I actually treated myself with a really healthy diet, a little bit alternative to what the doctors were suggesting. I felt like the connection of that regression, understanding that promise, and then being able to clear that in the between lives realm impacted my overall well-being.
So it's fairly common, even in traditional hypnotherapy sessions, for a past life to come up when a certain issue is being explored, whether it's a thyroid or a stomach problem or whatever.
Yeah.
Do you ever get the idea that some, let's say, traditional therapists don't really know what to do, or maybe they don't recognize that it's coming from a past life, or do they pretty much recognize it almost right away?
I couldn't answer that. I don't know. I haven't spoken with anybody who does just traditional hypnosis to find out what it is that they do. But I can share with you from the realm of working with clients who don't necessarily have a spiritual belief. I'm in Raleigh, North Carolina, so a lot of people here are concerned that spiritual and religion are at odds, which I disagree with. I believe that we're all friends, that we're all encompassed in one. So a lot of folks are very uncomfortable with the idea of spirituality. So I kind of suss that out during the pre-talk and in the intake forums. When they are clear they don't want to talk about spirituality, I just don't bring it up. However, it is my belief that the root cause for most of the issues that we have in life, whether they be health or mental or patterns, or I think most issues actually start in a past life. A focus of my practice is trying to take people to root cause, and the large majority of them will go to root cause in this life, but every once in a while, and it seems to happen over and over again, people will go into a past life. This just happened recently. The client was saying out loud, "What's happening? Where am I? This isn't even my memory." And I just say, just go with it. Just go with it. That's what your subconscious wants to show you. It's just a metaphor. And I throw it out like that, that it's just a metaphor. And I keep them engaged in the process so that they can move through it and get the healing benefits from it and enjoy the outcome or the insight that a past life regression provides. And then after a session, it's not uncommon for them to say, now what just happened? What was that like? Why did that happen?
Do you record the sessions as well?
When I'm purposely doing a past life regression, I always record. When I'm in a traditional type of, clinical session, I typically don't, but I do take notes.
Have you had instances where the client will listen back to a recording and not remember what they were saying or what they were expressing?
No, I don't think so. I think the state that people are in a state of hypnosis, at least the way that I facilitate them, they're completely awake, aware, and in control. They remember everything. Now, just like having any kind of conversation, you might forget some details. I'm keeping very diligent notes when I'm facilitating, so I generally send them the highlights.
And so you're saying experiencing a past life has nothing to do with whether they have any spiritual beliefs or not. Doesn't matter.
Absolutely not. That's the incredible thing. I could share a story if you'd like.
Sure, of course.
Yeah. I was working with this woman who came to see me for anxiety. And by the way, I got permission to share these. She came to see me for anxiety. And when I regressed her back to root cause, she did go to pretty traumatic event in this life. And I think that's fairly common. I do believe we have a root cause in this life as well. But when I asked her subconscious, is this the origin? She said no. She regressed back further. She went to the day that she was born. And that was actually a pretty traumatic experience, what she explained. And then once again, I asked subconscious, is this the root cause? Subconscious said no. We were suddenly in a past life. And this was somebody who's flat out told me, I don't believe in God. I don't believe in that woo-woo stuff. So she was pretty shocked when she was suddenly in this past life where she was a little girl standing outside watching a house burning down and a fire engine was coming. She was crying and pretty much in a shock state. And she had believed that she had burned the house down when she forgot to blow a candle out before she went to bed. And her whole family was inside. Her grandparents, her brother, her mom and dad. The most amazing thing that happened soon thereafter was that mom and dad and grandparents suddenly came into her awareness in this hypnotic state and said, we want you to know that this was not your fault, that grandpa was making tea and dropped a tea towel on the floor. And it was grandpa that did this. And I was blown away. I wasn't facilitating this. She was just telling me everything that was happening. As you can imagine, that little bit of information created quite a bit of relief for her because she had been holding all this guilt, even into this life, that she had created that harm, that something bad was going to happen, which resulted in the anxiety in this life. And so that turned out to be what cleared her feelings of anxiety. And those feelings were actually related to fear that her children were going to die, that something bad was going to happen.
Now, you mentioned a few moments ago, womb regression. I've heard the term before. It's not very common for practitioners to talk about, but are you going back to a memory of your client still in the womb, or what exactly is that?
Oh my gosh, it's so fascinating. Yeah, it's exactly that. You go into the womb when you're between the time of conception and birth. What a lot of people don't know, and I think it would be helpful if people know, is that the soul is picking up a lot about the life that they're getting ready to come into. They are picking up, unfortunately, on some of the mom stress, right? And some of the feelings of anxiety that mom might be having. They're picking up on the excitement, and baby's picking up on all of this. It is a time when you're starting to already figure out some of the life stuff that gets thrown at us right from the very beginning. Oh, this is a quiet baby. Oh, this is a big baby. This is a still baby. Oh, I'm looking forward to his birth. Oh, I'm not looking forward to his birth. We're already taking it in, those human labels, those expectations from that moment. So that's why sometimes the origin of a problem can be in womb. But even more interesting is that our souls are not really required spiritually to be in the body until the body is born, until the baby is born. So souls can be popping in and out and checking out the home life and the family, and also kind of getting information about family life. So this is a time when a lot of people want to know what their purpose is, what it is they've come here into this life to do. And I have found that womb regression is an amazing way to learn that, because the soul is still fresh from the life between lives, coming in with this purpose. And you're able to sort of navigate why you chose the family that you chose.
And we do choose them.
We do choose our families.
That's crazy, isn't it?
I know.
And I've been told it's not necessarily the family we want, but it's the family that we need in order to learn, right? That is really, really fascinating. A good way to find out what our purpose is to do a womb regression. You
could do a womb regression. Yeah, that's a great way to figure it out. And you can move from the time when you're really, really tiny, moving up into the fetus and, how are you feeling about being born? I personally, when I lead past life regressions, I lead people through 2 or 3 happy childhood memories in their current life, into womb, into past life, and then life between life. So there's a lot that's taken from a past life regression, including that life purpose.
That's the cycle is what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Let's talk about life in between lives, because I've been told that it's a space where we choose our parents. I think they have to agree to it. We choose the players. It's almost like casting a movie, is it not?
Mm-hmm.
Is it me or is that crazy? That's planned.
It's planned. It's planned. Yeah, I just worked with a client earlier this week who wanted to understand why she chose the family that she chose, why she married the person that she married. There's a reason. There is a particular reason. There's a lesson that our soul wants to learn. We take some time and try to find that right family that's going to be able to provide us with the experience that's going to allow us to live that lesson.
So does the in-between space come up often? Some practitioners, it happens every once in a while. Some say it happens every single time. How is it in your practice?
Well, I always incorporate it into the past life regression. There's never been an experience where somebody hasn't gone into that realm. On occasion, in a traditional clinical type of session, a client will go into the spiritual realm. And that is pretty fascinating. The client that I recently worked with who had this said, "This place feels so good. Where am I? It feels so familiar. It feels so good." And she was just explaining, all the feelings and the colors and the lights. And it's really, really special when people land there. And I really think tremendous things happen when people are able to get to that place in a regression.
So the spiritual realm, is that the same thing as life in between lives, or is it like a room in the life between lives space?
Yeah. So I personally, as a hypnotist, I don't lead the life between lives hypnosis sessions. I do past life regressions that include the more of the emphasis is on the past life than the spiritual realm. I believe that somebody who's more practiced in life between lives might be able to share more about that with you. What I typically see with my clients or hear them say is they experience either a tunnel type of feeling as they leave the body. And all of them really find this pretty amazing. It's like a floaty, beautiful feel. So either a tunnel or more of a floating feeling in light. And then when they get to the between lives, what I hear from them is that it's just a really comfortable, beautiful space, a little bit like a galaxy is kind of what I get, like a lot of stars and a lot of light. Beyond that, I'm not really sure what they experienced. My own experience was that it was a tunnel and it was lots of loving light that I could tell it was not just light. They felt like guides, ancestors, my spirit family. Yes. Mm-hmm.
All right. Now, you also have discovered what you call the hypnotic trance state. Does this have something to do with the spirit world?
So trance is, I think it's the most confusing aspect of hypnosis for people. I think a lot of people think of trance, unfortunately, as something they see in Hollywood, like where on Scooby-Doo where the eyes are rolling and, somebody's controlling your mind. Or, terrible example is stage hypnosis, which is a totally different type of hypnosis where the hypnotist is kind of playing around with that person. Now, all hypnotism is self-hypnosis. Those people in stage hypnosis would not do that if they would not cluck like a chicken if they did not want to cluck like a chicken. People can't control your mind. So Hollywood just kind of ruins hypnosis because it's such an amazing way to make change and facilitate just incredible shifts in who you are as a person. What I explain to people that trance is really a state of deep inward focus, and it feels a whole lot like when you're watching a really good movie. And in fact, watching a really good movie is a hypnotic state. What happens when you're watching a movie is your thinking mind generally is not on in the way that it is right now, right? Where you're analyzing, thinking, busy, blah, blah, blah. Instead, your thinking mind is quieter. You're crying if you see something in the movies or you flinch. And of course, that's not real. And if your thinking mind was on, you would realize that was real. So hypnosis, when I facilitate that, I tell people, you're likely not going to go into a state of trance where you're asleep. It's going to feel like you're watching a movie. And I help them focus inward by engaging their imagination. A lot of people are visual, but some aren't. But in any case, we just get really, really into the imagination. I don't use this example, but it might help. Imagine that there's a blue elephant in a pink room. How big is that elephant? What does that elephant smell like? What does it sound like? What's the room like? I start to just ask more and more questions to keep them focused inward. And of course, those questions that I'm asking are not going to be about the elephant. They're going to be about whatever problem or issue that's coming up. But that helps them focus inward and quiets the thinking mind, just like when you're watching a movie. Now that the thinking mind is quiet, you have bypassed the critical factor in the mind, the thinking, busy analyzer, and you're now deeply connected with your subconscious. Subconscious, in my opinion, is your higher self, is your divine, wise, loving self. And that is where all the answers are. If you are trying to make a decision, the answers are there. If you are sick and you need to know how to make yourself better, the answers are there. If you are trying to make a decision about a new job, right? The answers are there. So I believe that in a state of hypnosis, you are directly in touch with your higher self.
All right. Now, how does that help us have contact with souls that have passed on, souls that are in the afterlife? There is a connection to that, isn't there?
Oh, yeah. And this is something I was not trained in. It just started happening during sessions. I bet it happens twice a week now when I'm working. I have come to believe and understand that when we are in that hypnotic state, when our thinking minds are not quite as active, engaged, you are now in a state that's like a medium state. So if you went to see a psychic medium, this is the state that I believe that they are in. And now you are your own psychic medium. And relatives seem to be waiting for you to be in this state. I just worked with a very young person earlier this week whose grandparents were eagerly waiting. They were there and she had no idea. We didn't talk about this. This was a clinical type of session. In fact, she told me nothing about spirituality. She said, please don't talk about spirituality. And I'm not comfortable with it. I was like, okay. And her grandparents were there. And it was very clear her grandparents were there. For me, when I'm noticing this happening, I get chills in the back of my spine. And there's a little blue, kind of like an orb or spark that I see next to the client, only just for a brief second, but it happens all the time.
You see orbs.
Well, it's not so much an orb. It's more like a spark, a blue spark. Happens a lot. And I'm not a psychic medium. I don't claim to be, but this happens. And so this has been a surprise to me. And then they start crying because they're really sensing and feeling this connection. And so the session was supposed to be related to something completely different for this client. They're now in touch with their grandparents. So in that particular session, I gave them time to talk and to connect. Oh, and this one was fun because I asked her, I always do this so that they could see if it's real or not. Establish a signal or a symbol between you and your loved one so that when you walk out of this session today, if you were to see this symbol, you would know it was from them. So this particular client, I had forgotten that the session had started this way. And I saw her a second time a few days later. And she said, gosh, it was so strange. I got home and my mom had just bought a painting, and it was a painting of the symbol that she and her grandparents had just discussed. And she said, that's not coincidence, is it? I said, absolutely. That's synchronicity. And then I did go on to explain what I believe, that this is a medium space and that she was connected with her grandparents. And she said, I thought so. I could really feel them. And I see this all the time. It is so, so beautiful.
It sounds incredible. And what's really interesting is what you just said about the trance state. If we can reach that, we can be our own psychic medium. And even the psychics and the intuitives, they all say the same thing. We all have these abilities. Apparently, thousands of years ago, we all had those abilities. They were just a lot closer to the surface then than they are now. But that might be a discussion for another day. But that would validate those thoughts and those statements without question. So you're saying this happens fairly often now.
All the time. I had a session last week. Her session, we never even could get into it because she had so many relatives lined up waiting to talk to her. I said, you've got to get really directive with these guys, because we got to do this session. And then eventually she said, I don't want to do the session. I want to talk to these, to these people.
I like
it.
That.
It is very cool. And I always am very deliberate to ask for that sign or that symbol, or for them to ask the loved one for a piece of information that nobody knows, that they can go and verify with somebody who does know, because I want them to come away and believe the experience, and really trust it.
100%. So now that we're talking about souls beyond the veil, I believe you also, or at least your clients, work with spirit guides and even angels. Now, does that happen in the practice also?
It does. That's typically something that is deliberately brought in when a client has asked for a spiritual session. I then facilitate right from the start a connection with their spirit guide. So they get to meet their spirit guide, find out the spirit guide's name, or at least the one that shows up in session. They get to establish a symbol with their spirit guide, which I like to do, and then ask the spirit guide to guide them in the session to the memory or to an event that's most relevant to their issue so that they can completely clear it. And so spirit guide is part of this session. So that's particularly helpful because we have the added element of when a client is maybe feeling stuck or unsure of what to do, I'll ask your spirit guide, what needs to happen to clear this emotion? What needs to happen to feel better, to create this release? And then they'll get the answer from spirit guide. I also bring in angels, archangels, when there's deep healing that maybe needs to occur. And I usually respond to the client based on what's going on. Like if they feel like, oh, there's something stuck here, I don't know what it is. In a traditional session, we'll do what we can to clear it because I believe we are all holding latent emotions, that we didn't deal with at certain times. I think we stuff certain things, they could be big or small, but eventually they start to manifest into illness, to depression, anxiety, anger, fears. What I believe hypnosis does is it allows us to go in and release those. Some are harder to release than others. And that's why I believe a spiritual session can be even more profound because you've got the added element of a spirit guide helping you figure out what needs to happen to release that.
So how did you get acquainted with spirit guides and angels for that matter? Did they just show up one day or?
Me personally or through doing this work?
Either or.
Yeah, it has happened as a result of this work. I didn't know about spirit guides. I didn't know about angels, but they would come into session or people would say, tell me this. And I am a junkie for all things spiritual and hypnosis. And so I am always reading, listening to so many podcasts. And so I would want to understand what is this light being? I need to find out more about this. And then I would do my research and understand it. And so I think it's a combination of what was revealed to me, has been revealed to me in many sessions, and my own research of putting together what I believe, is coming into session.
And do they identify themselves, the spirit guides and the angels?
They do. I have found this really interesting too, that most spirit guides don't really have a name. It's more of a sound. I don't think that they have human language like we have almost always. And I don't mention this to clients because I just like to see it happen. I'll ask them, what's your spirit guide's name? And it's a sound. It's not a name. Over and over and over again. And I find that fascinating.
Really? Spirit guides come up an awful lot in all kinds of different discussions. I'm just wondering, when is the day going to come when this is just going to be as common as going to the dentist? What are you doing this weekend? Oh, I'm going to have a spiritual session. I'm going to meet my spirit guide. Do you think we'll ever see that in this lifetime or?
I get to see it now. I deliberately talk to my spirit guides every day. I do it while I'm driving and I speak out loud. And nowadays you can get away with those kinds of things because people think you're speaking on the phone.
Exactly. Yeah. That's maybe one of the few byproducts of the age we live in. For those of us who are spiritually inclined, right. I think recently you had a client or 2 or 3 clients that had entities that needed to be removed. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, again, this is something that's just happening, right? And I am kind of following along. Then, of course, I go to my reading, what in the world just happened? And so this is what I have come to understand is happening. This has happened quite a bit recently with more spiritual sessions. And again, with not spiritual sessions. A client will tell me that they feel something being removed from their body. We'll bring in an archangel. Calling in Archangel Michael's always the go-to, just to be sure, because,
Or Raphael.
Or Raphael is the angel of healing. And the two of them can work to remove entities. I had a client, she came in for a traditional session. Everything was going great. And then right at the end, all of a sudden, all these strange emotions kept coming up, words, worries, and these were not hers. These were her boyfriend's wife who had passed. And she suddenly had a knowing that this entity was attached to her. I believe that entities attach to us when our aura has cracks. And auras get cracks when we are struggling with depression, with alcoholism, with addiction, maybe even being very sick. Somehow or another, this entity was attached to her. It was very concerning because we hadn't anticipated this session was just about over. And suddenly this entity was talking about fear about her kid, worried about her kids being taken care of, all these words that were not my client's. My client doesn't have kids. I asked for divine assistance from Archangel Michael, from Archangel Raphael to assist with removing this entity, working with a cord cutting, working with light, and moved her through that process of having that entity removed. It was very freeing, and she didn't realize that the depression that she had been feeling wasn't hers. Most people don't even realize that we can pick up these negative things that exist around us.
Sounds like removing a tumor or something like that, something malignant.
It does. It does seem like that. Yeah.
Looks like you have a suite of highly skilled surgeons at your disposal. Definitely good to know. All right. So how does the law of attraction figure in your practice?
I believe that hypnosis allows you to do the work that people typically do when they're trying to attract abundance or to manifest something. You're able to do it kind of like on steroids through hypnosis, because once again, you've bypassed that critical factor in your mind, that thinking, analyzing, conscious monkey mind that gets in the way, right? Yeah, but you get past that. And now you're able to do everything that you need to do to manifest. You need to think, feel, believe, trust, be that successful person that you want to be. I incorporate a lot of visualization of future self, ideal self into session. And so they get to feel what it feels like to be making $500,000 a year. They get to see what kind of car they're driving and what mom thinks of their house and what kind of food is in the fridge. They can open their bank account and see how much money's in there. And those are all the things we're trying to do when you're just like, I'm going to manifest. I want to make $500,000, but in hypnosis, you can do it and really feel it. And once you've had that experience where you've really felt it, you believed it, you trust it, you smelled it, you heard it, it's a whole lot easier to do that visualization to help you get to where you're going.
So that's what you mean by saying in these sessions, spiritual sessions, it's actually possible to explore the future. Now, does that have something to do with getting into a space where there is no linear time, or is that not necessarily true?
I think we're already in a space of no linear time, right?
Right now, or just all the time?
Oh, I believe that we're all the time. I believe science is beginning to show us that it's becoming more mainstream, that time isn't linear. I don't have the background to be able to explain that. My understanding about everything I'm explaining to you has happened based on the experiences my clients are having. And what I have come to understand is that it's so easy to go into the past in a hypnosis session. I recently worked with a client who was doing some inner child work. He was struggling with some confidence issues, went back to his younger self and kind of rescued his younger self from an abusive home situation, and then imagined bringing him to his home where he lives now. In the session, he held him, he talked with them, they played together, they created his room together. And at the end of the session, that client said, I felt like I was with my younger self. I time traveled. And I believe that. I just can't help but believe it, because everything shifts once you've taken care of that younger self. you're not feeling the lack of confidence anymore, the insecurity. When you're not feeling that, your relationships change. I think it's time travel. And he did too. That, once again, was not a deliberately intentional spiritual session, but that was his takeaway, that it was time travel.
It probably came up because he needed to learn about that.
Yeah. But just to add to this story about the future, I gave lots of examples about the past. I had a client recently. She was planning on leaving her husband and wanted to explore whether or not she could do it and financially be okay. And would the kids be okay? So we went into the future. And very clearly, she saw the house she was living in. She could see the arrangement with her kids. She actually could see that her kids were going to be better off. She could see her yard, the patio furniture. It was all so specific. 3 weeks later, a month later, she sends me, realtor.com picture of a house that she is looking at to buy. And it's the exact house. And, it's got all the pictures. And you could see the front yard, the kitchen, the backyard to a T. This house was the house that she had described in session.
So, last question. How do you go into the future, or is that going to necessitate a part 2?
I believe that you can go into a future life just as you can go into a past life regression. There are future life progressions as well. Dr. Brian Weiss wrote a book on it, Many Lives, Many Masters. He also wrote a book, I can't remember the title, about going into future lives. So that is something that is happening in hypnosis now.
Excellent. I don't think I could possibly top that, so we'll stop there for now.
Okay.
Susanne, thanks so much for coming on to the show. Great stuff. In the meantime, how can our listeners find you online?
Yes, I work online and I work in person, so please reach out. I'm at journeyshypnosis.com. I have a Facebook page, Journeys Hypnosis, and Instagram at Journeys Hypnosis, so it makes it easy to remember there.
You've been listening to Closer to Venus. I'm Johnny Burke. If you enjoyed today's episode, please consider subscribing. For more info, please go to closertovenus.com. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.